no stranger to REA. I think it's going on 10 years now, Carl, that we've had the pleasure of having you with us, and especially timed every year for November, which leads right into Carl's strong suit. He's a professor of political science at Mesa College and a guest professor lecturer at the University of San Diego. What most of us know Carl from is his appearance on the media and in the media as a source for the media on all things political. And boy, it's very timely that he can be with us today after this really historic election that we've just been through. So without further ado, Carl, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dave, and thank you all for inviting me today. I want to thank you also. Let me go to my first of several screen shares. You're going to be like my students. I have to ask you because I never trust the technology. You should be seeing a conversation with Cindy McCain. Perfect. Yes. REA was a great supporter of that event, and it turned out very well. We got a lot of feedback. About 400 or 500 people have ultimately participated in the program, and plus we had another couple of hundred in our afternoon sessions. And again, the support of REA with the Institute for Civil Civic Engagement now and moving forward, I greatly appreciate. I want to thank you on behalf of our advisory board. We're working right now on like a pickup emergency civic intervention group squad that we started about 2 weeks ago on trying to prevent possible violence in San Diego. Good news, we haven't had anything developed subsequent to this election so far, but it ain't over till it's over, and it's not quite over yet. So we've been having about 4 or 5 meetings. It's the Sheriff's Office, Law Enforcement Coalition, City Attorney, District Attorney, ADL, League of Women Voters, lots of other nonprofit organizations, Lead San Diego. And if REA is interested in participating, let me know. I'll share the Zoom meetings with you for ways just to mobilize people to share information about what's happening in San Diego, work on ways to mitigate any negative political participation and try to encourage positive political participation. Last weekend, we had a really fortunate event. It rained, so any real protests you're going to have canceled on account of rain. If the revolution is to start in San Diego, it cannot be a rain day because 40% of the people will simply not get out of bed. So we'll see how things go moving forward. But again, I first wanted to thank you for that. And now I want to, let's talk about the election. I guess that was just a week ago. It seems like a month ago. This may be a nice day that I don't end up doing media because nothing in particular has been changing. But as you know, Joe Biden won the election, kind of, sort of, maybe. We'll see. More than likely he has. You take a look at it right now with 279 electoral votes. He has strong electoral showing. If he wins Georgia and Arizona, you've got 11 electoral votes over there, and he's currently up, and it changes every couple of minutes, but 15,000. He's up by around now about 12,000 in Georgia, and Atlanta still has ballots that are being counted. He wins those 27 votes, and he will have 306 electoral votes, 2 more than President Trump had in 2016. In addition, he's got, if you look at the math there, about 4 million more votes more than 4 million more votes than Donald Trump. By the time it's all added, I would imagine he'll be ahead by 5 million popular votes. So he will have a legitimate election, at least history will look at it that way, if these numbers hold on the numbers that he's winning by. You might say they're awfully small. He's winning by 13,000 here. Nevada, the state was called and he won by about 40,000. Remember, Florida was decided by less than 1,000 ballots, and the blue wall that crumbled in 2016 was all told decided by somewhere around 75, 80,000 ballots. It was not a huge number out of 320 million people of 150 million ballots cast. In no other country in the world, when they elected their leader by popular vote, do you worry about the fact that somebody was behind by 3,000 votes in a county in Alabama, or somebody was ahead by 4,000 votes in Reno? You look at the aggregate national vote. And when you win by 5 million votes, 51%, that's not a bad win all told. It's not decisive, but it would typically be seen as a victory. The Electoral College is going to, well, that and the 2 senators per state is going to destroy us as a union if we can't figure out a way around that. The problem is the states that benefit from it don't want to change the system. The party that benefits from it doesn't want to change the system because otherwise the party would have to change. And at some point, I don't know what would be worse than the current circumstance we're in. 2000 may end up paling in comparison. At some point, we have to fix that and becomes an issue. If you look at the overall voting, and then the Senate, again, don't know, 48-48, 4 remaining. Best the Democrats can hope for is that they pick up a double win in January in the special election coming out of Georgia. They might pick up one of those seats. If you look at it, the difference, the Republican was up, Purdue was up by just a couple of about 150,000 votes. But then he had almost 400,000 votes in the Georgia special election, with another million going to Republicans. You can spend a ton of money, but if you can't get the same turnout for senators that you get for president, Democrats can't swing the seat. And what apparently happened with the Republicans holding on to the Senate, at least 50-50, then you get Kamala Harris. She can cast a tiebreaker, but it's probably going to be 51, and Senator McConnell remains the majority leader. And then you've got divided government. A number of people split their vote. That used to be the norm. You vote for one party for the Congress, another party for the president. Remember, you had Republican and Democratic presidents from Eisenhower to Clinton, even though you had overwhelmingly Democratic Congresses. And sometimes you had Republican Congresses that could learn to work with presidents. The problem we have today is divided government means nothing gets done, because both parties, if they don't get what they want, look to the next election so they can get that majority, which they haven't been able to put together in a decisive way, really since 2008 for the Democrats for a brief time. Donald Trump had a chance in 2017 when he ended up controlling House and Senate, and he squandered it. They weren't able to agree on, amongst other things, Obamacare replacements. They got a tax bill through, which is problematic because a lot of people in the middle class and upper middle class are going to see their tax bills go up over the next 8 years because they rescind a lot of the tax cuts that went to the middle to make the whole thing pencil out, to show that it was not going to have a huge negative effect on the budget, which it did anyway. But in any event, it's going to be at best for the Democrats a Republican-controlled Senate by just 1 vote, maybe outside they get control of that. House, Democrats did really well in 2018. They paid the price this time around. Again, more divided government. They will have control. Nancy Pelosi gets another time around. The question is what happens in the 2022 midterm. Remember, Republicans came out with guns blazing. Electorally, let's just say figuratively, in 2010 and took back the House and Senate. They're going to be posed to try to do that again. Democrats are immediately on the defense, trying to maintain seats. And if the House caucus drifts too far to the left, you could see that end up flipping back to the Republicans. This country, as this election shows, is not a left country. It's a center to center right country in its overall voting pattern. It's going to take till the 2030s for that to really change. But what happened with the presidential election? Let me stop that share and go to this share, and hopefully a whole thing on Machiavelli doesn't pop up. My lecture for later today. Let's see. Oh, there we go. And I'll close this one down. USA Today had 4 great maps that showed what happened in America today. We're a purple country. But in many places we're brilliant red, and in other places we are brilliant blue, and you don't have a lot of places where that purple overlaps. You had the vote that went for Donald Trump, the vote for Biden, and they were in 150 million votes, relatively close to within that. You take a look at the overall map, and it's the same map we've had since the 1990s. You could overlay a satellite image of the United States at night, and you'd get the same result. If it glows in the dark at night, it votes Democrat. If it's dark at night, it votes Republicans. Since the 1970s and 80s, really since Nixon's Southern strategy, but also the backlash against the busing, when a lot of the white population moved out of city cores into the suburbs, the battle has been for the suburbs, and Republicans have been winning that. Since the 80s, the suburbs have tended to break more Republican, with the rural areas that kind of marked the Republican ascendancy of the 80s. What you've seen just in the last couple of electoral cycles, the suburbs are starting to break more to the Democrats. Uh, so now if it's urban and suburban, Democrats get a winning coalition. The Republicans are viable this electoral cycle. Every year that goes down, that's going to change. Paul Krugman's column had he quoted a saying that he said he wished he had thought up. I wish I had thought it up. He talked about the density and diploma divide. I just talk about it as the urban-rural divide. The greater the density, the higher the number of college diplomas people have, the more blue they tend to be. Why? Because
Michelle Barrett joined the meeting.
There we go. Welcome, Michelle. When you look in the city areas, well, I have a simple definition I give my students of politics. Politics are individuals with goals and a conflict that has to be regulated, and it's regulated by the state. We all have goals, we get into conflicts, and if we can't regulate it, we break up. We form a social contract. We say, I'll respect your rights, you respect mine. If we have a problem, we'll go to third-party arbitration, government. Here's the simple fact. It's kind of like atoms, as they start to bounce into each other, producing energy, producing heat. The more people you pack in any place, the more potential for conflict. The more potential for conflict, the more you need cooperation to make things work. You get bigger government. The age of industry around the world has ushered in more government because you got more people living closer together. In rural areas, you might not see that as much. You can operate under the false assumption you're the master of your own destiny. So there you are, a rancher in Wyoming, and you run your own life. But if the markets in Tokyo plummets, and the Tokyo markets can no longer afford to import American beef, you're out of a job. It gives you a false sense that you, again, are master of your own destiny. Oh, one other thing that's happened, if you want to make it today, you have to at least have a college degree to make it through the middle class to upper middle class. Some skilled trades can still do that, but it's more difficult with the decline of unions. And you want upper middle class or above, you got to join my peeps. You got to be of the graduate degrees and above. Right now, only 35% of Americans have college degrees, 14% have graduate degrees. They're doing well. Where do they tend to live? They don't live in North Dakota. They tend to live in metro areas. Atlanta has a higher percentage of college degree holders than on the average Wisconsin, Michigan do, much higher than you find in the Dakotas. We've created a meritocracy where those with knowledge and skill get the most rewards, but it's also an unfair meritocracy because it says 20, 30, 40% of the population can do well, then the people who live around them, the rest aren't doing as well, and they get grumpy. That's that rural-urban divide. Maybe COVID will start moving people out of cities more into the mid-sized towns, and maybe that will change the demography of America enough to start to change votes in these states. But once you skew the presidency, the Electoral College, to small rural states, which are operating in a 20th century economy, you drag the whole country back. We haven't been able to bring people forward into the 21st century. But you look at the next one, yeah, it looks like a lot of territory, but again, if it's a city, it tends to break to the Republicans, or assuming to the Democrats. The rural counties and areas break to the Republicans. Republicans, what was the remark I heard from some commentator yesterday saying, well, if you take California out of it, Joe Biden didn't get all that many votes. California is 40 million people that congregate near the coast. This is a basic undemocratic statement that was being made, but it's the view that those people, because there's so many of them, shouldn't count when they should count even more. Meanwhile, small states with a population like Wyoming, 1/70th of California, gets 1/18th of the electoral vote that we have. They're basically overrepresented by almost a factor of 4. But that's all Democrats have been winning. Voter turnout came up in record number. Oh, and this is why there was no big blue wave that repudiated Donald Trump. Donald Trump has a very strong base, and this base senses an existential threat. The society is changing. We've been lying to people in the rural areas, in the Dakotas, across non-urban America since the Clinton years and before. I'll never forget when they did Primary Colors as a movie. You had John Travolta playing Bill Clinton in a rare role where John Travolta was actually good. No offense to any Travolta fans out there. Travolta was playing Clinton, talking to unemployed textile operators or mill people like in New Hampshire. And he's saying, they're all lying to you. They're telling you they're going to bring back these textile jobs. They can't. They're gone. They're gone to Mexico. They're gone to China. What we got to do is give you the jobs of the 21st century. All right. When Barack Obama gave his 2012 and 2014 State of the Unions, he basically said that exact same thing. And 20, 30 years later, Republican or Democratic administration notwithstanding, we haven't fixed that. We've left a lot of people behind. The people in the oil, carbon, energy economy, in the Dakotas, across Montana, across the West, that economy is imploding. It's not environmentalists that are killing it. It's corporations seeing the future of green energy as much better for their bottom line, buys them some political support, but more than anything, it's going to be more efficient moving forward. These people also aren't nearly as demographically diverse when it comes to culture, to religions, when it comes to race, ethnicity, as you see in the metropolitan areas. Very few people immigrate to America and go straight to Montana as a place to live. They tend to congregate in cities, particularly areas that have people from the home country. Hey, my family came from Italy. When they came from Italy, they settled in little Italies around the Northeast. Then they came out to the West. Oh, sometime in the 1970s, my Italian-American family became white. Prior to that, they weren't. You all understand Columbus Day became a national holiday because the president at the time wanted to avoid the country of Italy declaring war on us because in New Orleans, 11 Italian Americans had been lynched for the blame for the assassination of a sheriff in New Orleans that they hadn't assassinated, but you had a lot of resentment in the region against these Italians coming in who were now taking the jobs the Black population used to be doing in the fields because African Americans were starting the process of moving into factories. By the 70s, my family moves into Scripps Ranch, and it was such a ethnically diverse neighborhood, you won't believe it. We were Italian Americans living across from German Americans, Irish Americans, Scots, French, Portuguese, all in the same community. You call that white today. If you got a memory that goes back far enough, you understand that 50, 70 years ago, these people were angry with each other and didn't like each other. So we pull together this idea of a whiteness in the 70s and 80s that really solidifies, and then you see the others coming in. And a lot of this election is a simple rebellion to the fact that people perceive that they're going down because other people are going up. This is the same argument George Wallace used, in the 1960s, talking about affirmative action. This is the same argument that Nixon used in the 70s, talking about the Southern strategy, how the federal government's pushing civil rights, which is hurting state rights, which has always been a call for the majority to be able to dominate the minority. All the major rights movements move at the federal level. And we're playing that out as baby boomers who came through that period are reaching the end of their life cycle. Now, what's going to be changing that? The younger generation is getting more college degrees. They're expressing a desire to live in suburbs and exurbs, moving out into the exurbs. They don't all want to live downtown. They want to be able to have a place for their kids. But you're going to start to see over the next 20 years a profound generational shift. Until that happens, you're not going to tip these things quite as much. Oh, but then you look at the shifts. The blue area shifted dramatically more with a huge turnout, but the red areas shifted as well. Again, this was a call to the battlement because both sides believed if they lost this election, it would be the end of it. Both sides are a little bit cracked on that. If any one election can end our democracy is already practically over. We just didn't notice it. We have to be resilient enough to, hey, we make a mistake, we fix it and move forward. I'll tell you one reason I believe both parties have drifted into this narrative. Republicans, more than Democrats, is the issue of, well, if you, what are you going to do if you can't blame other people? Again, 30 years later, 2 Democratic presidents, 2 Republican presidents, we haven't addressed the concerns of the people who lost their jobs in old industry. The jobs aren't coming back. We've lost industrial jobs under Donald Trump. Our trade deficit has actually gone up. But for COVID, it would be much higher under Donald Trump. That's because neither party has figured out what needs to be done. If you can't figure it out, blame the other side. What's that old expression? If the law's on your side, or if the facts are on your side, argue the facts. If they're not, argue the law. If the law is not on your side, bang your fist on the table. And both sides are banging their fists on the table. And then one last one. Now, you've heard of the San Andreas Fault. When I was a kid, I was told California was going to fall into the sea. Politically, it already is pulling away from the rest of the country. It's one of the most progressive states. You can see that. Stop this share and go to one more share, and then we'll get to some questions. And let me close this one. Move that over where I can see it better. Are you seeing our local election results? Does it say register our voters, anybody?
Yes.
Cool, we're where we want to be. First off, just in reference to the people that are out there making the false claims about vote counting, how can there be so many ballots out there still? They must be printing them up someplace. Well, considering the old expression is for a conspiracy to work, it can only be between two people and one of them has to be dead. If you're expecting that tens of thousands of poll workers around the country are colluding to do this, that doesn't seem likely. Look at San Diego. We're a week out. We've only got 82% of the vote turned in. As of this morning, that has been counted. Why? Because you get all the provisional ballots, you get all the last minute ballots, you get all the drop-offs, you get the grace period after the election for the ballots that are still coming in by the mail. I don't see anybody in San Diego County saying, well, Michael Vu, he's trying to throw the election. Todd Gloria actually lost. Barbara Bree should have won because look, you got that 20%. This is the way elections have always worked. It takes a little bit of self-dishonesty to argue the opposite. But then again, hey, when the ref makes a call against your team, you'll seize on anything to try to reverse what the ref said. In San Diego, it's not an issue because of the margins. Somehow or other, we became bright, brilliant blue. Now, the San Diego I moved into back in the 70s was a solid Republican town, Republican council, well, a Democrat every now and then on the council, no Democrat on the Board of Supervisors. 4 of the 5 congressional seats in the area were Republican held. And it was a reliable town, particularly with the old UT supporting all the Republican candidates, giving their staff paid leave to go work on Republican campaigns. It was about as blue as you could get. Oh, and by the way, if you're old enough to remember, back in the Carter years, the Republican Party was the blue party and the Democrats were the red party. The reason why? The red was the battle flag of the Confederacy. Blue was the color of the Union soldiers. So the Republicans were blue. Why did they switch it? The Republicans and Democrats ate each other's tail. Now, they basically have changed geographically. 100 years ago, all those areas which are now Republican tended to lean Democrat and vice versa. California used to be a big Republican state, though it also used to be a John Birch state as it went through. So in any event, we used to be very Republican. Now we are reliably Democrat. Look at that margin, 60-40. The last holdout, Mike Levin won a comfortable reelection. Darrell Issa, and that is in a purpling district, not a blue district. Levin wins one more. He's good until he wants to retire. The rule is 3. You win 3 elections, you're good for life. There's Issa. He squeaked it out. Didn't help Campanajard that he showed up on that Facebook channel with Save East County's people and smoking a cigar and drinking scotch. That's too much fraternizing with the enemy, but unfortunately they're not the enemy. They're fellow San Diegans you have to deal with. But it was always a seat that was going to be problematic, even with a huge blue wave, which we had. But Vargas, Peters, Jacobs, that was an interesting race in its own right. Sarah Jacobs, money and recognition. Tony Atkins, nobody really lost who was not supposed to. And you go all the way down. Well, I can't get all the way down. That'll make us all nauseous. Todd Gloria wins 3-2, and we now have what is an 8-person city council and a 3-2 board of supervisors. If California leads the nation the way we did with Prop 13 back in the 70s, Ronald Reagan back in the 60s and 70s, maybe we are the hallmark of where we're going for the progressive age. But you can't get there with an entire country unless you can figure out what to do for the 70 million people who voted for Donald Trump because they don't believe the Democrats are going to do anything for them. What the Democrats do to change that narrative becomes crucial. Now, I'm going to stop that share. we're now in a situation where we've had an election and we really don't know how things are going to play out. More than likely, as far as the election goes, barring some huge unforeseen circumstance, uh, Joe Biden becomes president. The question is, can he deal with Mitch McConnell in the Senate? If he can't, McConnell could say, my number one goal is to make Joe Biden a one-term president. We will have 4 years of civil discord, civil unrest, more deaths due to COVID, and probably a significant recession. And if we're bogged down like that, there are global powers hostile to us. The Cold War is not back, but it is a chilly war with China, with Russia. They have a limited opportunity to expand at the American expense. It could become a very, let's say, interesting, subtext, dangerous international environment. So if you thought this election was going to let you sleep well at night, it won't. What will let you sleep well at night is the love of your family and friends and the fact that the holidays are coming and Starbucks has red cups. But of course, don't hug anybody that you're not spending time with in your little bubble. How do you want to do questions? You just want people to text them, put them on chat?
We have 3 people monitoring chat and or the video, and I'm
Cool.
going to ask.
Yeah, just feed me questions and I'll answer as long as you guys want to hear me ramble on.
So Mike and Chris, you want to handle questions?
Sure. If people are comfortable with the chat feature, it's helpful if you just put your name up in the chat saying, I'd like to ask a question. So that offers us an opportunity to recognize you. But right now we're not seeing any questions in the chat. So I guess if anybody has a question, wants to raise their hand, if your video is working, then that could help us.
I do have a question. Professor, can I go ahead? I'll go ahead.
Go, Mike.
I thank you for your presentation. That was wonderful, as always. The one question I do have, though, is from the Democratic perspective, they've been very, very impressive in the amount of money they could raise with this. I think it's called Act Blue, or I think this is the amount of money they raised was astonishing. If they continue to raise money at that rate, how do you think that will impact future elections? Thank you.
It depends on how they spend it, Mike. If they spend it on just, the old-fashioned approach that you're going to go out and just get out your share of the vote, that's good, because then you get your turnout up. But you have to deal with the other side's turnout and see if you can change some minds, because there's really not a whole lot in the undecided middle. One of the big challenges is, how do you reach out to people on the other side with very balkanized media? You have to become better at coming up with the algorithms to be able to get into other people's feeds. But beyond that, like in this election, the Senate races, the Democrats significantly outspent Republicans. And I think they've hit the point now with the strategies they're using where it's what they used to call in World War II, bouncing the rubble. I mean, you've annihilated what you're going to annihilate, but any more tonnage dropped in that place is not going to help your war effort. So they have to figure out how they can start to really reach out at the state and local level. I mean, that's one of the things Republicans did in the Obama years. They took control of state governments, and they did well this year. They picked up control of another state. And here's the problem. Census time for Democrats, with the majority of states under Republican control, those states will be gerrymandered until in 2031. So what Democrats have to do is really work at running the candidates at the local and at the state level to try to switch things around, and also to start reaching out at very individual levels to convince Republicans they're not the spawn of Satan that they hear about when they're on their Facebook or listening to the AM talk radio, talking about Breitbart and the rest. Again, the demographic switch is going to help Democrats coming up, but there's something else that they saw in like South Florida. A lot of middle class, upper middle class Cuban, the business community supported Donald Trump. Why? They can blow off his rhetoric. They've heard rhetoric like that across their lives and other cultures, and they're looking at what's happening on taxes. The assumption that immigrant populations will always vote Democrat doesn't work unless you can do something to help those populations when they reach each stage moving up. Democrats have to show they're good from Wall Street to Main Street to rural RFD zones. Until they do, the Republicans take those areas, even though they don't have real policies that do directly help those people.
Thank you.
Great. Gary, you have a question?
Yes, Carl, thanks so much for your thoughts. They've been great for years. Question, Georgia. We haven't talked about that, and that's coming up. That's the next big issue. It seems to me that's going to be a straight slate vote, Democrat or Republican. You're either going to get 2 Republicans or 2 Democrats. What do you think the odds are there? What's happening in Georgia? Thanks.
Yeah, for the Senate race, if you're talking about, there's a chance that the Democrats could tip one of those, particularly with a full court press. I don't think that they're going to be able to tip both just because of the margins in the special election. But when you talk about Georgia, it reminds me, some years ago, my family took a trip and we were in England for a while, and we were in the Cotswolds, outside of London. We were staying in the countryside, and at the little inn we were at, this nice young gentleman came up I have the 4 daughters, and he walked up to my wife and he said, "Mom, can I buy your daughters a Pimm's and lemonade?" Yeah, pretty blonde girls. He wanted to spend some time talking to the family. Pimm's and lemonade, great English drink. What is that? Yeah, Pimm's, the liqueur, and basically 7-Up. He sat at the table. He asked us, "Hey, where are you from? Where'd you come in from?" And we said, "Well, we were in London and we came out here." He said, "London, never been, never going." Yeah, that explains Brexit to you. I mean, there's a whole bunch of people in England who don't recognize London as part of England. Atlanta is becoming the London of Georgia. Yeah, there's a whole bunch of people in Georgia who really don't have much connection to Atlanta. They live in old Georgia. They live in the more rural parts, the old economy. Well, Atlanta has changed dramatically in the last 20, 25 years. It's become a high-tech industrial city. North Carolina is doing that as well, but not as fast as Metro Atlanta. So that becomes a big divide just in Georgian politics. And the way things are skewed in gerrymandering, the state legislature keeps tipping to the rural areas. You saw that with the Stacey Abrams race for governor. It's going to take another 6, 8 years, probably again, my thought is probably till the 2030s before you see that decisive tip. And once you lose Georgia decisively or continuously, Arizona, Republicans are in a bad case because they can't win with a popular vote. They can't win with the electoral vote. So they can't win the presidency, and that leaves them those 2 votes in the Senate. And that will become the obstructionist institution that could blow up this union. Because at what point do the Californians and the New York say, look, for every buck we send to Washington, we get 80 cents back, and the 20 cents goes to the states, which won't ever support us with what we're doing. As a political scientist looking at dissolution of societies around the world, historically, we're not in a good place. How you fix that, I'm not quite sure, unless there's a quick demographic shift in the states which are very red, to at least purple them a little bit and pick up a few more senators that could vote either way. I mean, right now, the middle in the Senate is Romney and Collins. Yeah, and Collins knows she's going to be challenged on the right the next time around in a primary. I guess it all depends on what happens to President Trump. Does he go away, or does he still control the party?
Thank you. Jim Barros.
Hi, Carl. Thanks very much for your insights. I'm worried about this 70-day period where we've got a lame duck president who no one knows what he's going to do. Assuming that there is no significant change to the outcome of the election and Biden is going to become president, during these 70 days, how much damage can Trump do?
Yeah, and I agree. I don't think there's much change that could really happen. The legal challenges are being thrown out as soon as they're being brought in, and the number of ballots they're able to find something to even challenge on doesn't seem to be enough to swing any of the states. My bigger concern was, would state legislatures controlled by Republicans say there's been fraud, so we'll set aside and put out the electoral vote? When the Republican leader in the Pennsylvania State Senate said, we'll abide by the popular vote, that kind of took away some of those worries. So now the issue, as you're bringing up, what could the president do? Well, he's already firing people. He seems to be wanting to get rid of anybody who he had a grudge with, and so he's assembling those he can blame. Remember, the president's big on winning. He says he likes to win. He's not great on losing. So how do you not lose? You find somebody else to blame, and then you hold out the hope maybe he can run in 2024. So he wants to purge people from the government. Basically, what it means is for about 2 months, everything's going to be hollowed out and nothing's going to get done. I think it's unlikely we get stimulus. It's unlikely we won't get any forward movement on COVID. The big question is what happens on January 21 after Joe Biden is sworn in. Will Mitch McConnell look at him and say, hey, you've got an empty government stripped to the shelves. We're not voting you any money out of the Senate, and we're not confirming any of your appointees. Will they drag on that? If they do, I think the Republicans will pay a huge price in 2022 and again in 2024. But in the short term, it could make life miserable for everybody. I mean, the hope was they would blame Joe Biden if there's if this COVID crisis continues and all. I think Biden's in a good position to simply pull a Reagan. Remember, Reagan's first 2 years were worse when he came into the presidency than Carter's last 2 years. That recession of 80, 81, 82 and all that, he simply blamed Carter, said he really screwed this up. So I think you're looking at a dark January and a dark February, but probably by spring, if they get some stimulus through and the vaccine works, if the economy starts to pick up, then Biden can claim credit for it.
Karen? You have to unmute, Karen.
Yeah, hi, Carl. Just to follow up on that, if the Republicans can, I believe Donald Trump would just not even care that people he used as cabinet members be voted in, he would just say that they're just temporary assignments. So why doesn't Biden just do the same thing? If he can't get his people voted in, then they can be temporarily assigned until such time as they can be. I mean, this whole thing of playing around with the government is ludicrous and dangerous.
Well, the problem though, Karen, is what President Trump has been doing is he gets people into the lower positions. Then when the top, the secretary steps down, he elevates acting people. It's very difficult for a president to bring somebody brand new in to make them an acting secretary. You can promote or to acting from within, but it would be almost uncharted. You could argue that if somebody's at a cabinet, a sub cabinet level rank in one agency, you can do a lateral. I'm not familiar with how that would work. The old way you would do it was called the recess appointment. Senate goes into recess, House goes into recess, and you appoint somebody for the next year, and they're there until the end of the term. And then they lose their position, then you do another recess appointment. Obama was doing that 2010, 2011. The solution Mitch McConnell came up with, the Senate stopped going into recess. Even when the House would adjourn, the Senate would stay in session. Because the majority of Republicans would not challenge that. It takes a majority vote to challenge quorum and then to force everybody to actually be there. So they basically were able to block recess appointments. So the capacity of the Senate to obstruct is extremely large, and that could precipitate significant conflict, crisis. We'll have to see how that plays out in 2022. But even if Joe Biden got a majority in the Senate, there's the filibuster, the 60-40 rule. And while you might want to get rid of it now, if you're a Democrat, you don't want it to be gone when you're a Republican. Even for all this, the Republicans haven't gotten rid of the filibuster on substantive votes. Now, it does mean for appointments, you only need 50% plus one. But that's killing the courts, because now it used to be you had to have at least 60 votes to put somebody on a court, which meant you always had somebody from the other party. Now the court is being seen as increasingly partisan one way or the other. So yeah, it'll be difficult. It would require, the Democrats have to focus huge pressure on Mitch McConnell to get things changed. And why Senate majority leaders have evolved with that much power, the institution might want to try to change that a little bit in the future.
Thank you very much for that. Thank you.
Gene,
Can you explain to me why people voted for Trump?
Jim, thanks, Jim. Thanks very much. But Gene, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm curious about Trump himself. I wonder whether he really has enjoyed this part of his life. And if after leaving, hoping that he doesn't have to be dragged out of the White House, do you think he has further political plans or his sons do?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm sure there's a whole bunch of Republican senators who would like him to go gently into that sweet night, because again, how would you like to be a Republican trying to establish a national name for yourself when you always have to look over your shoulder to a tweet from Mar-a-Lago? Historically, presidents fade away. They do a library, and maybe he'll build a library. It'll be the first library with a slot machine in it, but that's the way it goes. The president does have problems. Remember, there's the 400 million in loans which are coming up. I mean, he could come out of the presidency bankrupted by it. This would be very unusual. Since Reagan, presidents come out and they make more money than they ever made before. He's not going to have quite that opportunity because all he ever had to sell was the name Trump. And as Jim Carrey pointed out on Saturday Night Live, that's now loser. And that's not really good for marketing purposes around the world. There's some talk about whether he might, what I hear on NPR, that he might leave the country and go live someplace else just to avoid the possibility of prosecutions coming up. One thing he might well do is do a complete flurry of pardons of anybody around him that could ever become a material witness against him in any event. We'll have to see what he tries with that. There's always the thought there'll be a comeback. But if you remember, Joe Biden is the comeback kid. No, he's won after multiple losses, but he was never president. You did have a president in the 19th century who lost and came back. I don't see that happening in the 21st century. Plus the fact the guy is old, he's not in great health, and he's going to have a lot of other issues to deal with. And the sons, they're Donald Trump without the charisma. You distill anything that people don't like about Donald Trump, you multiply it with the sons, and there are going to be a whole lot of powerful Republican senators, congressmen, and governors who aren't going to want to have to get in line behind Donald Trump Jr. So I think some of the people around the president's dangling that in front of him. Maybe you can be president in 2024. To do that, you have to leave. I don't think it's a real viable solution. And I do think you're right that the last 4 years have not been as much fun as he thought it was going to be. He thought he'd just show up, give orders like he did in New York, and everything would be done. It was like, what was the remark from Truman saying, poor Ike, he's used to giving orders and having them followed. I'm sure Trump found this to be frustrating and possibly personally ruinous. And I also want to address that question. Why did people vote for Trump? 70 million Americans see their status in society potentially threatened. People talked for the Trump voters, the violence associated with Black Lives Matter was a bigger concern than COVID. I don't recall 250,000 people dying in the violence associated with Black Lives Matter, but in their media and in their views, it's still 1969. The cities are on fire. The riots are going on from the anti-war demonstrators, and they're voting Nixon. That's what drove it. The Democrats have not given them a convincing reason to vote for them. Oh, and what was the comedian Maya Rudolph when she had played on Saturday? Kamala Harris, she said, I'm a first Black woman to be vice president, first Asian American, first biracial vice president. In other words, for half of America, your worst nightmare. And that's something to be said with that. We have not purged racism from our system.
No. Yeah. Thank you.
Joan,
Right.
and you have to unmute. Joan, you have to.
Joan, yeah.
Yeah,
there you go.
Thank you. Hi, Carl. Thanks for everything. I'm curious what you know, if anything, about Kamala's replacement here in California. And we've seen, a certain list come out as potentials, but what your thoughts are there.
In my own personal mind, that's firmly a after Thanksgiving question. I only have so much bandwidth looking at it. I was asked that on Fox 5 last night. And we have one of those weird things, in California, the governor gets to appoint. And it depends. Does Newsom want to appoint somebody he can control and then get the backlash from everybody else who wanted the seat? Or does he go with a safe, just a holding, somebody to hold the seat? My bet is he goes with just somebody to hold the seat. I remember that I brought up Rob Blagojevich last night. Remember when he got Obama's seat? They caught him on the FBI wiretap saying this thing is gold. We're going to trade this and then he went to prison. I thought that was a bogus rap, by the way. Every governor who's ever appointed a senator has always made political deals on it. It's not like he was taking wads of cash for it. One of the things we've done to America to make it clean, we got rid of earmarks. We got rid of all that pork barrel legislation. So legislators can't go home and say, here's what I've done for you. If they can't deliver the goodies back home, the only thing they can run on is how evil their opponents are. Yeah, so I'd like a little bit of background deal making. It's what made America work. Remember, George Washington passed the Constitution by basically selling 2 federal judgeships to the 2 leaders of the Anti-Federalists in New York. They changed their votes and they got lifetime judgeships. If the father of our country can do it, it's fly and jiggy with me.
Okay.
Other questions?
Any other,
Anybody?
yeah, any other questions? Let me turn to the other page here. I don't see any right now.
Mary Ann?
Yeah, I have one. I can't resist. So the Trump boys may not run for president, but what about Ivanka? What do you think about her?
I don't think, well, I mean, it's a possibility, but the question is, where's she going to run? She's in New York, so that she has to move state. And any state she moves into, there's the problem again of there's already people who want to run for those seats. And maybe she runs for Congress, but why does she want to do that when her real thing is wanting to get her handbag line going again? I don't see it as a good business model for her. And Melania, of course, she's just going to take the son and go back to New York. I think the Trumps are not going to be a long-lasting political dynasty. They're not going to be the Kennedys. They're not going to be the Bushes. Though, who knows? Maybe, why can't I remember Melania's son's name?
Barron.
Yeah, Barron, or the grandkids. Maybe they decide to run down the pike. They may be looking for jobs if the family fortune goes belly up. So maybe they go into politics. Typically, rich people don't go into politics, and people who go into politics don't get rich.
Okay,
Thank
you very
you.
much.
Well, I
Any
want to thank
last
you all.
question?
Oh, do we have another
Okay.
question?
No, I think that's it.
Very good.
Thank you very
all.
much.
And hopefully when we meet again next year, all this will be resolved and America will be doing well. Keep yourself safe and have a joyous holiday season coming up. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year's, glorious Kwanzaa, Happy Hanukkah, and into January.
Thank you very, very much. Well, that's the end of our meeting. I again encourage everybody to stay safe out there, and I hope you all have a nice holiday season. And again, we do not have a board meeting in December, so we'll see you all in January. So stay safe, have a happy time, and see you soon. Thanks.